Yeah, one of the things that I feel is always worth entertaining as a potential thing for working out is that for the longest time, when people think about stretching, right? Stretching, there are different properties of stretching, right? And this is just semantics. So the idea is, in order to prevent injury or to prep your muscles for mobility during a workout or anything strenuous, you are attempting to contract the specific muscles without exhausting yourself. So minimizing the exhaustion. So what that looks like is, if your legs, right, say your quad, your front of your legs is stiff and you're gonna go for a run, the idea is to make the same contraction motion that you're going to run on, and doing it slow enough, but you get the muscle contraction. And that muscle contraction is what some stretches actually do. The idea of but sometimes when you stretch, not all stretches will activate the muscles. So they don't have to be bigger movements. So when you're slowing down, if say your lifting only goes to this range, right? The idea is to get the contraction in the muscle, then the stiffness subsides. And in that stiffness, once that stiffness goes away, your muscle is warm. Mobility is when you increase your range of motion through stretching. So like your hand, like my shoulder, can reach all the way back here, but it's not functional for my motion in, like, say, your chest press. So when you're stretching beyond this range, you're improving your mobility. However, it is also taxing and increasing the chance of injury when you're doing a motion that doesn't require this mobility yet. So over time, when you finish your workout, then you do stretches. It's not necessarily to prevent injury, it's to increase your mobility and range of motion. The only time you can avoid injury, to avoid and prevent injury, is to not exert yourself past your range of motion, right? Or applying too much force in your range of motion. So when you're stretching and limbering up, getting loosey-goosey, it causes you to do a concentric and eccentric movement that is beyond your range of motion first. Hey, Brown, what's up? So when you're stretching, you're really only contracting and doing dynamic things within your range of motion already that you're set for. If you tend to stretch well beyond your range of motion, and then you go into your exercise, you are more likely to overextend your range of motion that you have already trained for. When you stretch after working out, where your muscles are warm, they're fatigued, then you increase your range of motion. The rest period is what gives you an increased range of motion. Then that preps you for the next time with the increased range of motion. I say range of motion a lot, but that's kind of my working way of explaining, I suppose. Conventional knowledge has suggested that when you're stretching, it makes you feel good, right? Like this whole stretch makes you feel good. That's increasing your range of motion. It doesn't necessarily improve your weight bearing motion at the time you do it. So when you're stretching, you're already not beyond your range of motion. You're not prepared for that the day of the exercise. So generally speaking, you stretch after that passive, slow, increased range of motion stretching after you work out. When you do dynamic sessions, like warming up, you're only doing a lighter version of the range of motion you've already trained. So if you want your fingers, per se, to be warmed up and not stiff, the act is to move it safely within any bounds to get a contraction movement of it. And then once you're warmed up, you go into your training session with whatever you're looking for, like accuracy or so on and forth. But you have to go to for me, I rapidly do that just by getting my fingers moving. So for running, you bounce up and down or something, like just hop up and down, try to create the motion without actually doing the full effort motion yet. And the threshold is arbitrary. The threshold is subjective in a way. You have to execute the contraction and not just trigger the sensory response. So what is a sensory response? Sensory response is if you do this, right? If I make this motion, it's just a sensory response. If I pull really hard, even with no weight bearing, and feel the contraction in my muscles, that is the warm-up stretching. That is the dynamic contraction you're looking for. So you just do this really hard, but it's nowhere near your weight-bearing performance. That's your warm-up. That's the thing that will prepare you for your exercise. So if you're preparing your fingers for weight-bearing motion, you could clench it and then let go. And then clench it and let go. That would be considered a dynamic way of warming your hands to go and do some motion. And after the exercise, you can then do what you usually do, like push your fingers past its range of motion and stuff. And then in the future, when you're going to prep for your exercise again, you'll have that increased range of motion, right? That's kind of the idea. Most people don't do this. You don't have to do this to improve. The idea is what's preventing injury is your awareness of how hard you're pushing, which most people do by doing exercises in general. So all the other tips and tricks are a bonus for your well-being and your health, right? So the only reason this may be interesting, the only thing this may be interesting is that when you focus on stretching, as in increasing your range of motion, it actually likely increases your, it may increase your chance of injury and also make you underperform. You're way more prone to injury after playing for longer in general? Well, yeah. That is very reasonable. I don't necessarily think... I think most people can empathize with you. That endurance will make you be prone to injury. If you're talking about across, like longitudinally, like a month or two, then your regimen is not sustainable. So your recovery periods are not long enough to sustain your activity. So if you're not talking about a session, which is not endurance, a property is rest. So your rest period is not great enough, generally speaking. So you're doing wide scope since you're saying general, then your rest period is not enough to sustain your consistent play style. I mean, it's hard to convey that logic dictates that if you're depreciating over time, then it's not a subjective take. It's not sustainable. right? Because by logic, if you can't sustain it, then your routine isn't sustainable. So if you're becoming more and more prone to injury over time, sorry, the song is really loud. If you're prone increasingly more to injury from repeating the same routine, then the routine itself requires reform. If it's not the routine, then if you remove the routine and replace it with anything else, you're likely not, like, if it is the routine itself, like playing OS itself, if you replace it with any routine, like temporarily, it shouldn't show the same pattern, right? That would be hypotheses testing. Alternatively, you could say one's getting older, etc. You can try to, those things are like conditional. They are not malleable. That's why you're kind of switching things up. Excellent. I really like that. Sometimes it can be tough switching things up, right? Like, oh yeah, I invested so much time into this approach, and then now I'm doing a different approach. But that is a very healthy, like, perspective. Especially, it's a great life skill too, to being able to change it up. And that's great. I think that follows really well. Yeah. Definitely. Alright. We're gonna give this another go here. The thing is, you can literally see your consistency getting better. That's nice. As in aim consistency, okay? It sounds like your right hand is, or not your right hand, but your aim hand is doing work. Those are quite, different components. Do you do anything with your other hand that is aim related? Or dexterity, like driven kind of thing? Okay. I'm dominant on my right hand when it comes to dexterity, so. Although there are occasions where if you think about specific instruments, if you play like certain musical instruments, they kind of swap it up with you, you know, like sometimes the dexterity consistency ends up being on the other hand. Like if you're right-handed, like on a guitar, your right hand is the rhythm hand and your left hand is actually the dexterity hand, which makes for some interesting experiences. Just a slight plug for ever curious if you're, you know, want to become a musician one day or something. Swap it up. We'll do one more run of this. I think I'm kinda okay right now at looking at it. Still unsteady for triples. Resetting on the ring finger still feels kind of weird. Gotta establish that mind-body connection. I view it like it isn't really worth going into instruments unless you're taught from a young age. I respect that. So how do you ever start new things if you feel that there are things that aren't worth doing from a young age? Are there things you feel are worth doing regardless of when you started? Like name a skill that you feel is timeless. Not all things, just rhythm is hard to pick up the older you are. I can see that. I'm curious, what makes you think, what are your observations that make you think it's harder to pick up rhythm the older you become? I'm resting for a bit. Muscle memory builds really easily when you're younger. I don't know how to explain. English isn't your first language. All right. And some stuff isn't translatable exactly. I can I can see that. I beg to differ. However, you know. Also, funny thing, I just realized I'm really shaky, but one of my best skill sets is precision. Interesting. That is kind of counterintuitive. If you're shaky yet precise. You might be consistently shaky, so that's precision. So, um, let's review some stuff. Since you're saying English isn't your first language, precision is consistency. If you're consistently shaky, you're precise. Accuracy is based on a standard that's predetermined. So the difference between accuracy and precision is that precision just requires consistency, doesn't require being on time. And then accuracy is a component that involves other than consistency. So if you were able to condition and adapt to your shakiness, then you become precise with shakiness. So an artist can be incredibly precise with their brushstroke when they're consistently, doing the same type, right? For example, you can be precise in smashing. Also, here's a little bit of a throw idea. Muscle memories don't build any easier or harder the younger or older you get. Your intellectual interference increases when you're older. So when one accrues more experience, you have a lot of muscle memory that interferes with when you're younger. So here's an example. If you're a musician, then you will have the muscle memory of a musician. When you're going to do something with your other hand, then that muscle memory, right, that you already have can contribute and interfere or accent or improve. So here's the thing. Muscle memory is established differently as an adult. So it's not that they're easier or harder, but they're different. And the biggest hot take here that you must understand is most human beings establish the way they learn by the age of 18. So they are framed in a way that they stop learning to learn. Learning is a skill set. However, generally, most adults decide they are sufficient enough to be happy the way they learn once they reach adulthood. So they don't naturally learn how to learn as an adult moving forward. So if you're trying to establish new muscle memory, for example, the approach is different when you're older than versus when you're younger. So it seems easier when it's younger because that's the first thing you did. It's the most intuitive thing because it's the first thing you practice. As an adult, intuition has to be subsided with pragmatism. So through our adulthood, we keep striving to find ways to create objectivity and pragmatism so that our intuition doesn't create interference. So when you're saying that it is easier to establish muscle memory when you're younger, it's because you have less muscle memory. Yeah. So I love it when someone is showing that they are constantly finding new ways to learn new things. So when you're saying you're changing it up and stuff, that screams to me someone who is adapting and appreciate that when you're getting older, you have to learn differently. There are benefits and trade-offs. For example, your learning curve as an adult is overall way shorter than the learning curve when you're a kid. Yes, you can focus on the aspect of intuition when you're developing muscle memory. However, there are so many things as a kid you learn very slowly, right? Uh, if you're a kid, you're void of experience. So when you talk to a kid about, say, something that requires a lot of experience, the learning curve is very short or very long. A great example is if you go back to high school now, you'll probably learn way quicker intuitively. So your muscle memory, your brain's muscle memory, is established way quicker than when you're a kid. So their learning process is different. And what I tend to focus on, well, what I do as a professional back in the day, uh, I teach younger adults, as in the transition between a kid that's learning intuitively into adulthood, where they have to have the skills to learn like as a hybrid, being able to process objective observations, integrate them into their intuition, or whether just to stop relying necessarily on intuition. So adults fundamentally just stop there most of the time because it's really not necessary. So what I'm saying here is when you're saying it's not worth picking up an instrument anymore because you believe that muscle memory is more easily established as a kid, it's fine for your happiness. You don't necessarily have to develop a skill to play an instrument as an adult. So there's no pressure to do so. As a kid, you are a blank slate. You have to attach on and establish some sort of identity. So whether you think it's optional or not, as a kid, that perception is not there yet. You have not had enough experience to determine what is optional, what isn't. So when you're trying to empathize with younger people, they do feel like they don't have any other choices. They do the things they like and focus on the things they're good at. As an adult, you can always pick up things that you're not good at, and you know how to establish how to like something that you don't, and know the necessity of skills that you don't otherwise practice as a kid because there's no conception of that. So your learning and decision making ultimately changes as an adult. And if you want to become a successful adult, like a one that is very dynamic and not relying on intuition, as in being lucky, you end up being a scholar, right? Like myself. I would consider myself still a scholar, where my learning curve and muscle memory is far more efficient than I am when I was a kid. Because as a kid, I only did particular things very well. As an adult, I do a lot of things particularly well and quickly. I don't do anything I learned as a kid anymore. The kid experience formed the foundation of how I learn now. So everything that all the experience that I accrued as a kid is used and integrated into the way adults learn. So if I ever have to go to a high school or a middle school or elementary school or a college as a person who predominantly involved in teaching, like helping people learn, the methods used for those specific periods of learning are different. As an adult, if I'm talking to someone who's 20 plus, maybe have a high school diploma, I would use different techniques because our brain, the way our memory and stuff works, it's a balance between interference and acquiring new knowledge. And you can't be that whole saying you can't be a blank slate anymore because you aren't. Adults are not blank slates. So they're actually tackling, if you're approaching it like you were younger, it will always seem harder because you have way more considerations. You have to juggle all those considerations. As a kid, you play the instrument. You just play it. There's no frame of reference or standardization, barring, the internet and YouTube and stuff. That's kind of changing the landscape of this paradigm. However, there are rarely any interference outside of that. As an adult, you have your entire life experience creating interference or an advantage. So, how do you become a great painter as an adult? You use all the tools and your experience to make your paint unique. So, here's the thing. When you pick up painting as a kid, it's not unique yet. As an adult, it will immediately become unique. Regardless of what your aptitude is, the mechanical portion, as an adult, the learning curve is incredibly short to become unique because you have experiences, and those experiences can be advantageous or disadvantageous. So the way I play OS is a reflection of my adult experience, and I'm way older than the average OS player. I'm almost 37. So when I play OS and I can explain OS and people give me advice, I'm rarely ever surprised by their advice. However, it comes generally from people who are younger than me. And those are very mechanics forward. And I typically ask if they play instruments or want to start new things, because as you grow older, your strongest advantage against your younger self is that you can learn things really, really fast. It might not be muscle memory, but if you have certain methods, you can learn it faster, more consistently, and you know what is important. So kids are spinning the wheel. They're just, you're gambling. Kids are like, I think I like instruments, and then drop in a hat the next day. Like, it's not that great. They're experimenting. As an adult, you have preferences. You have wants and dislikes. If you can turn all your experience into something that's proactive towards the skill you're building, you'll get it way faster than when you're a kid. You can understand the complexities of storytelling immediately to the point it's boring automatically. A kid will still be processing what that language means. So there's, trade-offs and stuff. But I wouldn't underestimate how beautiful you currently are, right? As an adult, you can learn things really, really fast, as long as you choose to. Not that I'm trying to encourage you to pick up an instrument, but I can tell you it's amazing when you hear an adult learn a new instrument versus a kid learning a new instrument. It's two really different things. Like, an adult would pick a melody, pick an artist, and imitate the artist, and then grab inspiration immediately from that artist. Because an adult is proliferated with so many different experiences that are already musically inclined. They would probably pick a specific genre. A kid can pick up any genre. Does that make them better at picking up things? Not necessarily. One is just more selective than the other. They're both learning very differently. So when you're thinking about, learning an instrument, how do you measure an adult's learning process? Did they pick up a unique identity in their melody already? How do you measure a kid's aptitude? How fast they mechanically pick up the instrument. So when you say it's not worth picking up an instrument because muscle memory is better established or easily established as a kid, you're telling me that you're much younger than me. That's where I'm getting from. It's not bad or good. It's a form of lifestyle, right? It's your experience. An adult is incredibly unique. Like, they create and compose complex things immediately. A kid has to work up to that. But comparison is also key to improving. improvement, stagnation, you're comparing apples and oranges. So comparison can be just as deleterious or damaging when you're not using proper comparisons, right? So when you expand your comparative methodology, you can then see the trade-off in stagnation or not. You are stagnating because you're comparing apples and oranges. So for example, when you say it's not worth doing something, that's comparison leading to stagnation, not comparison using to improve against stagnation. When you not do something, it's the other effect. So as a kid, you do that too. For example, you start playing a guitar and YouTube shows you that you can never be as good as that guitar. That guitar is on YouTube. That's comparison that encourages stagnation. But that's apple and oranges comparison as a kid. That person had different circumstances growing up and getting to that point. You have different circumstances and things that got to your point. It becomes even more, the gap of apples and oranges comparison gets bigger exponentially as you get older. So when you get to my age, that perspective is different now. No longer is the perspective about comparing apples and oranges. It's about how I can refine my techniques to my yester self. And I can definitely say if you're on the older side, it can feel that your younger self, so you're comparing to only your younger self as opposed to, other young people who are even further apart. To your younger self, I can confidently say that mechanically I would pick up things faster as a younger person. However, if I played an instrument for 11 years as a young person, it would take me about, I would say, roughly 11 or 12 years to play the instrument, master the instrument, instruct the instrument, and create an identity for myself. As an adult, it would take me less than a couple months because I already have an identity. So if the end goal is to become an instrumentalist, because the goals are different, right? As a kid, you want to be like, I don't know, mechanically really cool about it and feel good about it. As an adult, I want to create something unique that only I can create. The kid will never get to the adult's perspective until they become the adult. So I learned painting when I learned how to draw and do things only like 4 years ago, right? It took me if I were going to draw as a kid, I would need guidance, influence, people to tell me, like show me different things. It would take me a really long time to create a product that people like to look at. It takes me a fraction of the time as an adult because I have other advantages as an adult. And your goals are different. So for me, your goal was muscle memory, right? You mentioned specifically muscle memory. So the mechanics of the instrument. As an adult, for me, as someone who has played instruments before, it's no longer about mechanical complexity. It's about complexity of storytelling. So instead of trying to be a person who plays as fast as possible, showing off as dexterous as they can, it's about knowing when to play. The dynamics of the sound. Like, it's quiet here. I'm only strumming once. To an adult, strumming once could mean far more complex and intricate things about myself than being able to execute a perfect FC. Let's relate it back to how we first met, right? Just a few, 30 minutes ago, when you told me about advice about improving accuracy by stringently adjusting OD. what I see I'm doing is following the natural order of things that makes me very satisfied. So our goals don't meet because we have probably a very noticeable generational gap. I imagine, I'll take a guess, I'm at least 10 years older than you, generally speaking, if not more. So our goals and perspectives are very different. And it's fun talking about those. So I generally ask you about your goals and what you're even more. My guess is you're like 19, 18, 19, something like that. Maybe between high school, probably high school is. So there's a really big generational gap is what I would say. Yeah. It's very common. You're 18? Yeah, it's very common. So it's really cool though, as an 18-year-old. I'm going to have to say this though. As an 18-year-old, when you tell me, whenever I hear 18-year-olds always trying new things, which I met a few more 18-year-olds 2 days ago, it happens in OS because all my other games are, the age range is kind of very different, right? Because it's not mechanically inclined. You're already showing the maturity of understanding that as you grow older, you're going to have to learn different techniques to take advantage of your oldness. There's a great advantage. There are people who choose not to do that, and I don't think you're one of them. And that's incredibly endearing because you're not going to learn the same way anymore. And keep exploring new ways to learn. That's when we can, in another 10 years, the conversation will be very similar again. Although then I'd be like I'd be a senior citizen by then. Alright, that's a good rest. Now we're gonna step down. So, I'm gonna step down from here now. This is where we descend. Let's see how it goes. I stay by one subset for a long time, but then I also learn more. You stay by one subset, but you're switching it up, is what I'm saying. It shows that just use one, as a foundation. So you're stretching out. I can tell you that there are many people, I would say a large majority of people nowadays in your generation, that has difficulty stretching out from their foundations. They want to, they want to really close themselves into that foundation. But you're showing initiative to stretch out from that foundation. You're even using the word foundation. Too many younger people are blinded by meta. Yes, I would say yes. So the meta doesn't necessarily have to be just OS, right? When you get used to spending a lot of time in playing games like this, it bleeds into everything else. It bleeds into how you approach solving life problems or learning how to adapt healthy eating habits or getting exercise. Things like that ends up bleeding into your learning process. So for me, this discussion is an exploration on trying to figure out where you are or where I am, like comparing and contrasting how you're learning things. I think as long as you have the capacity to learn, and it's one of the core life skills. If someone tells me that, I've been doing this for a while and now I swapped it up, that's already like 9 out of 10 points on the life scale. So, and it's fun because then I have something to ask. I always get to ask interesting questions like, what makes you think this and what makes you think that? Because you have something to say. You have explored it. The moment you catch yourself, like if you catch yourself saying, oh, it's too hard to explain, right? Or it's too complex to explain. I think that's a disservice from the internet, really, because you can just bumble through it. You can just use words. The more you practice explaining things, it's not only helpful to the communicating to the other person, but also yourself, because then you explain it to yourself most of the time. And exploring that is what will allow skills to expand and improve. So for me, what can I contribute as an older person? I can firmly tell you that the things kids struggle with, right? The things that kids struggle with as an adult is a clear advantage. Hey, you want to learn how to do Java, for college? I'll pick it up in 3 months. For a kid, they don't have any other experience to go on, so they're going to do a vanilla style. You can be incredibly talented, for sure. Like if I was a kid, I would still spend more time learning complex things than I am as an adult. This is not taking into account physical limitations of age. We're talking about when the physical limitations is not a thing, right? If an adult is highly educated, not in like school or something, I'm talking about highly educated about their self and understanding about how they learn themselves over time, it is, for me, I would take the bet that if you have reached that state, you will most definitely learn things faster as an adult. If you're learning slower as an adult, one really big conclusion or association that I can say is you're probably having a really happy life. And things that worked out when you were younger worked out now as an adult. So you don't need to learn faster as an adult because you're under practice. If you believe that you don't learn faster with more experience, then you probably didn't need more experience about learning. And all I can say about that is I'm not here to convince you need to learn faster, because clearly you didn't need to, so you must be really happy on the way you learn. But fundamentally, if we're really using logic, right? We're really using logic here. Experience trumps everything. As an adult, you have all the capacities of a kid outside physical limitations. So if you're trying to learn something, it's not because it's easier, it's largely because it's more complicated. The kid, when they're playing an instrument, they don't have to worry about all the other instruments. When you become 18, now you have to worry about all the things you've done that also overlaps with the new thing you're talking about. So it's harder to learn an instrument because you've done a lot of things with your hands and you have to juggle all those things. If you can masterfully juggle all of them, then you can learn something really fast, which is great. I want kids, especially like when they're getting older, to have that perspective. Like I'm almost 37 and I'm doing this and it doesn't hurt me. I'm not overtraining. I'm enjoying the process and it works to my advantage. So I know so much about myself that I can do this nonstop without ever feeling like I'm stagnating, because I'm tapping into all my experiences of how I know I could train. So this is not a style for anyone. Actually, in fact, I would discourage what I'm doing quite a bit for younger people. Older people operate like this a lot of times, where they deconstruct and then try to get themselves to focus. Because older people have a lot of things to think about, like a lot of things. Muscle memory is great when you're not always thinking about 8 billion things while trying to learn something, right? If you're trying to learn a mechanic and all you can think about is, man, this feels so different from the piano. It's like you're learning a guitar, it's like, man, this feels so different from a violin. That's a personal one here. So every time I try to play a guitar, I think about a violin, right? Because a violin is a different position, but the left hand is interfering with the fretting of the right hand. It's kind of like what you're doing now with os. You're swapping up your arm style. While they are very separate things, you still have to contend with what you have already established. So when a kid learns one thing, an adult learns multiple things non-stop. So you learn how to not do something and learn to do something at the same time. A kid doesn't have to worry about that. When you're learning language, right? When you're learning language, to become fluent, it takes a long time arguably longer for an adult to pick up a second and third language, because adults have to juggle all the complexities of knowing another language really, really well. Hard to switch at first, but easier once you're getting over the first curve. That would be a rudimentary way of looking at it. Yes, that would be someone who doesn't understand, but doesn't need to understand that a learning curve can be smooth. So generally speaking, if you're not a scholar, when you switch, it's not integrating, it's not seeing it as a compliment, it's seeing it as a substitution. So what I mean by this is, someone who thinks like that would be, sprinting is not the same as jogging, right? There's no overlap. You're gonna say that it's harder to switch from jogging to sprinting because sprinting is fundamentally slightly different, or very noticeably different. Yes, on the one hand. There are also very commonalities between jogging that you can use to prep for sprinting. So the switch may not be as hard as you think. That only comes with taking advantage of your adult mind. Your adult mind in order to deconstruct and understand what overlaps and what doesn't. When you're young, you can't see those patterns. You can't see how playing tennis might be related to how your diet is. One conversation I have a lot with OS players, especially younger ones, is how eating healthier, or they are always, generally they share surprises or reluctance. Eating healthier, getting a good night's rest, improves OS almost dramatically more than just overextending and playing longer sessions. The connection is through experience and knowledge. A kid passionately just, grinds their body to the ground because they can. The nice thing is, when you're a kid, you're really robust. Your rest periods are very short, right? Like, you're a go-getter. It's just easier to assume more is better, right? However, as a kid, when they say assume more is better, they're assuming more is better in one dimension, because the kid only understands one perspective. It's still the same as an adult. If you assume you're getting more rest than you had before, you are more rested. It's just now the component is bigger, the bigger picture, than the smaller one. Some adults, when they're younger, their world expands just big enough to make it sustainable and happy. That's it. So, depending on how big the perspective is, it's still the same. Like, if you expand bigger, what it does is there are more things you can do better. And they're all connected. If you do not, if you're trying to find how things are separate, it doesn't work to the advantage of an adult mind. The advantageous thing is to find connection to everything. So how do you motivate yourself to get a job? Well, a job brings money. Money provides certain things. As a kid, it's like, well, I like this thing. Why do I need money to do this thing? I don't see the connection. Right? So they're very focused on tasks. Adults, when compared to their younger self, become progressively less and less focused. Because their world is bigger and bigger. So when you're saying, is it easier to learn as a kid? It's not. It's just different. As an adult, you're learning way more than you can possibly ever imagine as a kid. You have to unlearn things. You have to retrain things. As a kid, you don't do that at all. You haven't even reached the skill set to do that. And the biggest deep cut about that is learning how to create new habits and drop new habits. Kid, instantly just attach to whatever habit they want to do. As an adult, not only do you have to establish the new habit, you also have to consider how to juggle all the habits that interfere with your new habit. It can be negative habits, which are addictions, and it can be positive habits, which are life skills. So, for example, communication. If you're having trouble talking to strangers or expressing yourself, what does that mean? Your mind is going to start spinning. Adults have so many things they have to try to focus and deconstruct. As a kid, it's like, well, you just talk. Just talk. So what do you do when you educate a kid about communication? Just get them to talk to other kids. That's it. No thinking, no interference, just do. So as an adult, you typically want to encourage an adult to simplify a bit until it's manageable and execute. If you can't simplify, it's too hard to switch. The barrier, what you're trying to do is you're lowering the barrier. So the older college students get, like when I'm thinking about education, a freshman is far more open than a senior in college. And you want to complement that. How do you get a senior to think about alternative paths? It's going to be way more difficult because a senior has invested 4+ years into something and a freshman has not. So the perspective follows with that. It's hard because it is hard for you, right? And you can ask yourself, how do I make it easier? Because as an adult, you are way better at making things feel easy than a kid. When a kid thinks something is hard, they have no choice. They drop it like a bad habit because they have no choice. There's no skills, no problem solving that will ever get them to do something they don't like, i.e. eat vegetables, maybe try some sauce, go out and have fun outside. You can't convince the kid to do any of that. As an adult, you have all the flexibility in your toolbox if you so choose. So when you're saying it's hard to switch at first, for me, it's 99% of the time never hard. It's hard to switch as a kid because I only wanted to do things I'm good at. And my world was so small because I latched on to the first thing I did that was good. As an adult, I can choose what to be good at. And I remove the boundaries of learning new things. To me, that's what it means to be a scholar, as someone who's just picks up the learning process. So to next year, I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna learn 2 languages, and I'm going to do it. That's it. No barrier, no nothing. I just told myself, starting February, I'm just going to do it and start doing it. I understand myself well enough as an adult and use all the advantages. I'm not going to learn the same way, you know, like a native speaker or like some 20-year-old said like, oh yeah, I'm bilingual because as a kid, I've learned 2 languages and now they're great. I'm not learning like that. Like, I'm not taking advice from someone like that. I'm going to develop my own approach because I know a lot about how I learn. So when you're offering advice, I bet it works for you. I absolutely bet it works for you. I can also explain why I do the way things I do very, very well. And it'll be objectively understandable, but not emotionally relatable. Because you wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't encourage you to do this. I'm demonstrating something that maybe if you love oaths into your 30s is an option. Because my perspective is, it's not that rank, it's not that accuracy, it's not the OD, it's not your AR. Because the human brain, as an adult, goes beyond this stuff. You don't require to see it work. You can see it work without literally seeing it. So I don't have to change the OD necessarily to get better at OD if I know myself well enough. So that's the fun part. I mean, it might be clickbaity. I might be baiting people into this, but you know, and it's great.